You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This week's episode is the recording of a talk I gave called Living the Voluntary Life. And it's the talk I gave on a boat at the Freecoast Festival this year. I had a great time at the festival, met some great people, and just really enjoyed the whole experience. And I was very pleased with this talk, but I will say that the recording is very bad quality, unfortunately. This is a recording through the air on a boat, and we had a lot of engine noise from the boat. I've done my best to clean up the audio with the help of some friends, but it's still rather poor quality audio. I still wanted to play you the recording though, because I think the content is really good. And in case you do find it difficult to hear the talk, just to give you a heads up in advance what I'm talking about, it's 5 different ways to live a voluntary life. And the different ways that I go through in the talk are rational thinking, personal freedom, peaceful parenting, financial independence, and internationalisation. Before I play you the recording of the talk, I just want to say a quick thank you to my new patrons on Patreon. Thank you very much to Ross W. and Thomas F., who both signed up since last week's episode. Don't forget that if you would like to support The Voluntary Life, you can do so by becoming a patron on Patreon. I will put a link in the show notes. You can also find out more at thevoluntarylife.com or go directly to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/thevoluntarylife. Thanks so much for listening, and without further delay, here's my talk on living the voluntary life.
So, a year ago when we were doing our debrief from last year's Freecoast Festival, there was one name above all that I wanted to have at Freecoast Festival this year. And I knew it was going to be difficult to do, being from so far away, but some way we were able to pull this off. And I am so excited we were able to get him. For those of you who don't know Jake, so he started his business in 2010 with the rat race to live job-free at the age of 38 years old. He wanted maximum freedom and a chance to spend every day doing only the things that he loves, and he does it. So far, that's included publishing 2 books, which are both fantastic reads. Make sure you get his books. Becoming a perpetual traveler, going minimalist, playing in a band, and doing his podcast, The Voluntary Life. If you're not listening to this podcast, you really should be. Fantastic podcast. So starting and selling a business enabled him to live job-free. So the emphasis of The Voluntary Life is on entrepreneurship and financial freedom. He talks about how to overcome your employee conditioning and build your own kick-ass business with a purpose that you truly believe in. So without further ado, I want to welcome Jake DeSoto.
It's so good to be here. Actually, as Roger was saying, my wife and I travel, and we have a lifestyle of permanent travel, and we've been living all over the world. And it's great, it's really fun. But one thing that we do miss is community. And, you know, it's just been really moving to come here and visit and be a part of this festival, because we've just felt so welcome. So thank you so much. It's really exciting to see what a great community you have here. And my wife is back at the hotel with our daughter, who's just getting over the jet lag. But yeah, we really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to be here to talk to you tonight. I would like to talk to you about treating the principles of individual liberty as a guide to the good life. That's how I have come to see the principles of liberty. When I first got interested in libertarianism, I was interested in questions like, how would we build roads without a state, and this kind of thing, abstract ideas. And very quickly I started to see that these principles were really primarily about my life, my personal life, and how I could live a good life. That's how I view these principles. And yes, you can talk about who will build the roads, but that to me is a secondary and far less important aspect of these principles. I see them as an incredible opportunity to live a life according to your own ethical values and find a way to the good life. That's how I see these principles. So what I'd like to talk to you tonight is about how you can use the principles of liberty in your own life, in your personal life, to live the voluntary life, which I see as living a life according to these principles. And I'm going to give you 5 examples of different ways to live the voluntary life. I got interested in this approach and this way of thinking about these principles fairly early on when I got interested in liberty. I found Harry Browne and his book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, and that really spoke to me, especially just that title. The idea of finding freedom in an unfree world really resonated for me, because that's what I want. Regardless of whatever we're able to achieve in terms of changing society as a whole, I want to find freedom within this unfree world. But beyond that, for me, it's not just about me finding freedom personally. I also see using these principles in my life as the best and only way that I can contribute to making the world a better place. Because after all, as Mike was saying, society is just individuals, and I'm the individual who I control. So what I can do is make a difference in my life, in the way that I treat the people who matter to me, and the people I do business with, and the other people I come into contact. I can change myself and my life, and in doing so, I'm modeling these principles, and it also means that if I want to talk to somebody else about how important the principles of liberty are, at least I'm doing it myself, and I can, I don't feel like I have the problem of not practicing what I'm preaching. But also, we all have to start as individuals with our own lives, because that is society. Society isn't something out there. Society is you and your relationships and the people in your life. And this word that we use, society, really just means all of those relationships together. So it really starts with yourself. So that's how I got interested in this idea of treating these principles primarily as being about my life and what I can do to change my life. So I'd like to give you 5 different examples. But I do have to say, there is a catch that I found with this. And the catch is, it's a lot harder to think of these principles in terms of your own life than it is to think about who will build the roads. That's so easy. It's quite comfortable, actually. We can talk about that forever, How would we build cities without the government? Who will build the roads? Those kind of questions are abstract and impersonal and very comfortable and easy to talk about. And what I found is that when you try and treat the philosophy of liberty as something about your life, it's kind of challenging. It forces you to question yourself, question the way that you treat the people in your life and your personal relationships. And I found that it's uncovered things about me that I'm not so proud of, and integrity fails that I discovered about my own life and the way that I treat others, where I've had to ask myself, do I really take these principles seriously in the way that I live? So it can be uncomfortable to think about liberty in this way, but it is so fulfilling and so rewarding, and I think so important in terms of our purpose. That, the discomfort is worth it for the fulfillment that you get from using these principles primarily in your own life. So, how can you apply the principles of liberty to live a voluntary life in your own life? I'm going to give you 5 different examples, and in doing so, I'll talk through the questions that I have asked myself, and I invite you to think about these as 5 opportunities to consider for your own life too. The first way I'm going to talk about is to really take on rational thinking as a core value in the way that you handle your own personal life. If you're interested in liberty, then you're using arguments of individual liberty that come from the Enlightenment. That is where the idea of individual freedom comes from. It comes from the movement called the Enlightenment from the 18th century, and that movement was all about 2 things. It was about rational thinking and individualism. And it was all about challenging authority and challenging unquestioned tradition with rational thinking. So libertarians love to use rational thinking to challenge other political viewpoints. And they say it stands to reason that you can't just print more money and make us more wealthy. When you do that, all that you will do is create inflation. That is a rational argument. they're using logic and reason to criticize statism and other political perspectives. So if you're interested in liberty, you're using reason to show the false premises of other political viewpoints. But the question I had to ask myself is, well, if I want to do that, how much have I really applied those standards to my own ideas, to my own pet prejudices and my own irrational thoughts? And that, I think, is an incredibly powerful question to answer. And if you ask it of yourself, it's going to come down to probably two key ways in which we have a lot of irrational thinking. It tends to be through religion, and it tends to be through politics. I myself was not brought up religious, but I was brought up in a very political household. My mother was a committed communist revolutionary. I grew up in a squat in South London with people who were actually dedicated to creating a violent revolution. That is what they believed in. Luckily for me, they happened to be the kind of communists who were more on the intellectual side, and so their idea of creating a revolution was mainly selling newspapers, propaganda as we called it. My very brief career as a communist revolutionary involved going out on Saturday morning and trying to sell newspapers on the street. So that was when I was 15 years old. And that's the environment that I grew up in. And the ideas that I held, that I absorbed in that environment, was this idea that, we're on this historical path to the revolution, that this utopia is going to come, and we must use by any means necessary to get there, and so forth. And I went through a very long process in my life, moving away from those ideas and criticizing them. And I used rational thinking in criticizing them. I questioned the premises of these political ideas, and I saw how unreasonable they were. And my journey was basically to start off by saying, well, of course, that's pretty unreasonable, communism. But then again, I moved a little bit more into being kind of a middle of the road, I guess, vaguely liberty-oriented person, to being kind of a minarchist. But if you start questioning these things, then what you end up with is realizing politics is unreasonable. All politics is based on false premises. And ultimately, that was a journey that I went through. In many ways, socialism and communism are very much like religions. And I sort of feel like I gave up a religion in doing that. I think in your own lives, it is an incredibly valuable thing to question the irrational ideas and prejudices that you may have grown up with, whether that's political or religious. And there's a philosopher called Michael Huemer who made the point that the biggest challenge facing humanity is irrational thinking. It's a bigger challenge than anything else, because anything that you think about, war, poverty, conflict, the environment, any other problem that you think about, we will not solve if we're not able to think rationally about how we approach those problems. I would apply that same argument in your personal life. Whatever problem you face, the biggest problem is whether or not you're able to think rationally about it, because you're not going to solve any other problem in your life unless you are able to approach it with rational thinking. So for me, I want to take this idea of using logic and reason that's very core to the libertarian tradition and to the Enlightenment, and apply it in my personal life to my own problems. And that means challenging my own prejudices. And it's an ongoing process for all of us, me included, but it's an incredibly valuable one. So that's my first example about ways in which you can live the voluntary life. The second example that I want to give you is about personal freedom. We talk about, in terms of libertarian philosophy, we talk about this idea that there are no unchosen positive obligations. This is obviously a very important idea for libertarian theory. The idea that, what are you talking about social contract? This is just an idea that you've made up. Where does this come from? Where is the obligation that I signed up to? And it's very important for libertarians to point out in politics that there are no unchosen positive obligations. Yes, you can make a contract with someone, you can choose to be obliged to something, but there are no unchosen positive obligations. What I'm trying to do is apply that to all my relationships. and to question the relationships in my life, and to say, it's all very well talking about politics and unchosen positive obligations, but what obligations have I taken on in life? What things do I feel obliged to do that I haven't really chosen? And to question those things. And I'm going to give you one example from my personal life as an example of this. A few years ago, before my wife and I got married, we talked about how exciting it would be to get married and what a great thing it would be to have a wedding. And weddings are great, but we also noticed that weddings can be pretty stressful. And some people can actually end up having a pretty tough time when they get married. And usually that's to do with family drama. So we thought to ourselves, if we're going to get married, we have two rules: no stress and no drama. That was our rules. We're only going to do this if we have a wedding with no stress and no drama. Now, I would love to say that I come from a family where it would be possible for us to have a wedding with no stress and no drama. That would be great, right? And my wife too. But I don't. Unfortunately, that's just the fact of it. I don't come from that family. So we decided that we weren't going to invite our families to our wedding because we don't have to. And we decided we were just going to have the kind of wedding we would do the things that we thought made sense, and we wouldn't do the things that didn't make sense. So we just invited our friends, and we had an awesome party. We had a great time. Some of the people who are here on this boat came to our wedding, and it was great. We had an awesome time. That is an example of using this principle of no unchosen positive obligations in your life to think about, what do you do in your own life? Do you live this value in your own personal relationships? And that's one way in which we thought about applying that. The third example that I want to give you for ways in which you can live the voluntary life is one that I think you in this room really understand, and I'm so excited having seen the panel this morning, and it's peaceful parenting. And I want to just make the point that when we talk about the philosophy of liberty, the principles of liberty, we talk about the non-aggression principle, and we make the argument that initiating aggression is wrong, it's unjustifiable. You can't justify the initiation of aggression. And when libertarians make that argument, they're making it in general about society as a whole and the state and so forth. But I just think it's so powerful to apply that to your own personal life, to those areas of your life where you do have power, and of course that especially is true in parenting. And it's so powerful to say, I choose to actually live these principles in my own life. I choose not to initiate aggression, especially upon the people who are most vulnerable in my life, especially towards children. And we know that if the initiation of aggression is wrong, then your way of showing that you live that principle is through your personal relationships. And I think peaceful parenting is a great example of that. Practices like spanking and circumcision and these kinds of things are not self-defense. They cannot be self-defense. They are, therefore, aggression. And peaceful parenting is a way to really live your values. And as I said, I was so excited to see the panel this morning, and this is something that I feel you guys already are really talking about a lot. But it's an example of living your principles in your own life. The fourth example that I want to give you for ways in which you can live the voluntary life is to go for financial independence. This is something that has been a long process for me through my life. The background to this is, as libertarians, we think about how the world is made better. And as Mises said, there's three ways in which we make this world better. There's three groups who make the world a better place. It's the innovators, who create incredible new technology and new scientific breakthroughs. It's the entrepreneurs, who bring those innovations into the marketplace and change the way that we do things. And it's the savers, who actually create the capital, the wealth that we can use to invest in making the world a better place. And as libertarians, that's what we say is the motor of progress and real progress in this world. It's those three groups: the innovators, the entrepreneurs, and the savers. And we criticize government by saying, look how wasteful and ineffective government is, and look what a terrible mess they make of kicking the can down the road, not saving for the future, wasting money and so forth. So for me, the question is, if that's the way I see the world, how can I actually live that value in my own life? How good is my financial discipline? What can I do to actually be a part of these progressive forces that I'm talking about? And it's been a very long process for me because, as you can imagine, I grew up with communists. I didn't exactly know a lot about personal finance and saving and that kind of thing. And I have found entrepreneurship to be the most exciting way for me of making a difference, of creating wealth in the world. So I started my own business. I built that business to a point where it was profitable. I found a way to sell that business. And when I sold that business, I decided, rather than spending it on toys for my middle age, I would actually save that money and live with financial discipline from the investments that I made, so that I have the freedom to do what I want with my life, so I can live in any way that I choose. That, to me, is the most tangible kind of freedom that you can have, because it gives you the freedom to do all the other good things that you want to do with your life. And you don't have to be an entrepreneur. There are other ways to achieve financial independence, like the route through extreme saving, and these are some of the things that I've written about in my book, Job Free. But if you're interested in living these values, and if you see entrepreneurship, wealth generation, and as the progressive force that Mises talks about in being, then your opportunity is to take part in that process. To either build your own business or just to be a saver and create the wealth for your future so that you have financial independence. So that's the fourth way that I want to suggest to you that you can live the voluntary life. And the fifth way is internationalisation. So as libertarians, we talk about the state, and we talk about how the state is the biggest danger to our liberty and to peace on earth. The state is really what we see as the biggest danger. What I have thought about, and again this has been a long process, is if that's really what I think about the state, what can I do myself to ensure myself, if I consider the state to be the biggest danger, what can I personally do? Yes, of course, I can complain about it, and I can write pamphlets or whatever about it, but what can I do that is actually going to make a difference in my own liberty? And I think that the most effective thing that you can do, if you're really concerned about the danger of the state, the potential of government to become even more tyrannical and to really threaten your liberty, the best thing that you can do is to consider internationalisation. There are lots and lots of small things that you can do and big things that you can do. Harry Brown, who again was sort of one of my big influences, he had the idea in his approach that one small thing that you can do is to put some of your assets outside your home country. You can invest some money abroad, so that if things get really crazy in your home country, then you can potentially have some money available elsewhere. We of course live in a different age now. We have Bitcoin, which is an incredible opportunity for you to do that. But there are other things that you can consider. What we have chosen to do is to really internationalize fully, and my wife and I have expatriated, and we have taken out a residency in another country, and we're looking to even establish citizenship and do lots of other things to become more international, so that if my government gets even crazier in future, I can just unsubscribe. Say fine, come on, have fun. So that's the approach. Now, I'm not suggesting that you all move to Latin America, which is what we're doing. You can stay here. But what I am suggesting is it's worth considering just getting residence in another place. Even if you never move, this is the kind of thing that you can do to give yourself options in the future if you need it. And then you can be here and enjoy New Hampshire and have a great time. But if anything ever gets crazy, you can just leave. And that's the opportunity that I think internationalisation has. So these are 5 ways in which I want to recommend to you to think about how you can live the voluntary life in your own life. And in doing so, I think this is a chance to embody these values and to actually see if they really work. This is the way I judge whether or not these principles mean anything or whether it's just a lot of talking, is can I live these principles in my own life? And if I can, then I take them seriously and I think they're really valuable. And if I can't, then I think they're just debating tricks, basically. And the amazing thing about voluntary principles is that they are actually things that you can live in your own life. When I was growing up, I got to learn a lot about the relationship that communists have to their ideals. And it's a very interesting relationship because communists have ideals and they have a vision of a better world, a vision where people live in peace and prosperity and everyone lives happily together and so forth. But they have a very interesting relationship to their ideals because that world exists after the revolution. That's the place that we're going to. That's the holy land that we'll one day get to. But the way the communists think about it is, if you really want that world, you have to be really ruthless in this life, in getting it. And in fact, the more ruthless and vicious you are, then the more it shows that you must really want those lovely ideals in the future of living peacefully together. So there's a complete disconnect between ideals and how you live. And if you watch that life as a silent movie, and you didn't know about the big, wonderful future that they imagined they were heading towards, then what you would see is people behaving actually really viciously towards each other. The difference with voluntary virtues and voluntary ideals and the ideals of individual liberty is that if you live these ideals, then you will live a life of integrity, of good relationships, you'll invest in your relationships, and you'll have a good life regardless whether we actually achieve libertopia in our lifetime. You will live a good life because you'll be living your own libertopia in your own relationships, and you'll be demonstrating that this is possible. The science fiction writer William Gibson said, the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. And libertopia is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. I'm living part of it in my little bit, and I invite you to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you like this podcast, please show your support by becoming a patron of The Voluntary Life on Patreon. Your support will help to grow and improve the show, and you'll get access to a treasure trove of rewards, including bonus episodes. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to learn more.